Hi, all, welcome to the series of lectures on psychology. And in this session, we shall be discussing one of the most interesting, one of the most exciting topics of psychology, that is what you see on the screen, intelligence. Okay, let's take a deep dive into the discussion. Okay, so my question before we start discussing the various aspects of intelligence is, what is the common thread that passes through all these people you see on the screen, some of whom you may recognize and some you may not. Well, some of those that you recognize, I may call out. You have Albert Einstein here, and you have Sharon Stone here, a Hollywood actress. You have Stephen Hawking here, the physicist and scientist. You have Gary Kasparov here, the grandmaster, and the rest of those. I don't know if you can recognize. Paul Allen, of course, is a co-founder and has remained as CEO for several years in Microsoft. And so one thing is, all these hail from various avenues, various backgrounds. Someone is a movie artist, we have scientists, we have chess players, we have sportsmen, we have academicians, we have NASA scientists, we have professors, uh, but there's something common across all these people. Any guess? Yes. So I don't know how many of you have guessed it. I'm sure many of you may have, because in addition to the name that you see on the screen, you see consistently a numeric, a number beside their name. What do you think that is? Yep, that's the measure of their intelligence. All these people are having a measure of intelligence which is minimum above 150, which is considered as a higher level of intelligence. As it goes further high, the individual is considered more intelligent, right? You can see someone with a measure of intelligence as 280, which is recorded as, I guess, the highest in this list. William James Sidis, and 154. So the range is between 154 and 280, and all of these are above the range of 150, between 150 and 300. And what is this measure of intelligence called as popularly? Yes, it's called intelligence quotient, IQ. So all these people can be commonly regarded as people with high IQ. How do you arrive at this IQ? How do you measure the intelligence is the most exciting part of it. That will take us to the rest of the story of this session, as to what intelligence is, and how do you evaluate, how do you assess this intelligence, and how do you arrive at this measure of intelligence called intelligence quotient, and what are the various attributes, various yardsticks, various criteria that you consider in order to assess an individual's intelligence and arrive at some conclusion, numerical, quantified conclusion about it. Okay, so there we go. Uh, okay, so what is intelligence to begin with? I think that's pretty simple definition to understand for ourselves. Intelligence can be understood as the ability to perceive, learn, understand, know, and apply the information that you are exposed to. Information could be linguistic, could be mathematical, could be spatial, could be from various domains, various branches, various subjects, various avenues. But whichever domain, whichever avenue, the piece of information, how quickly are you able to, how effectively, how correctly, how precisely, how efficiently is an individual able to perceive that information, learn about the information, understand the information, know it well, and finally apply that information for practical purposes. That's what defines, that's what describes, that's what explains the intelligence of an individual. I hope that that goes clear with all of us. So how do you arrive? How do you know when someone is intelligent, whether someone is intelligent or not? Or how would you assess as to how much of intelligence is possessed and is demonstrated by which individual? Which is why you have in this context something called an intelligence test. So what is a test? Test is anything that attempts to, that promises to assess certain skills, capabilities, knowledge, awareness of an individual. But then for an instrument to be qualified as test, you need to have certain qualifying criteria. What are those qualifying criteria? You cannot just say this is a test for anything. Like for instance, you have you have tests, you have classroom tests, you have the the semester tests, you have end semester tests, mid semester tests. Now for a question paper to be qualifying as a test, it has to adhere to certain criteria, and two of the most important criteria that an instrument of assessment must qualify in order to be called officially a test. The two criteria are called reliability and validity. A test must be reliable. What do you mean by reliability? Okay, before we further go into the discussion, these are the two questions that you need to answer, and that takes us to the next part of the discussion. Okay, so we were talking about the two criteria that are necessary for calling an assessment instrument a test. What makes it a test? One, criterion one, is reliability. It has to be reliable. Whatever answers, whatever conclusions, whatever indications that the test result is giving, it must be reliable, because you have to take a decision. You have to take a crucial decision, right? Say, imagine you are being assessed on the psychology test for the undergrad level, but if you are if you are given the question paper of a postgraduate level, and if someone fails you, can you call that kind of question paper a test? No, because you are not meant to be qualifying in that question paper. It is not of your level, it is not of your standard, and hence it fails to be, which is what we call as the criterion, the within test consistency. Within test consistency, the content within the test must be reliable. The score must be reliable, right? So test retest can be, how do you ensure that the test is reliable? One, test retest, right? You test the candidates with one test, and you take some time and you retest candidates with the same test. You see the scores, you compare the scores. Are the scores reflecting certain comparability, consistency? Is there a consistency in the scores? Are they lying somewhere close to each other, or are they divided? If they are lying close to each other, which means there is a test retest reliability. Or you take a parallel test, that is, you take the test, you put the students to the test conducted by a certain body of certain university, and you put the students to a similar test for similar level from another university or another body of assessment, and you test the results. Are the tests comparable? Are the results comparable? Are the results consistent? If yes, then it qualifies the parallel test criterion. Likewise, within test consistency. Now, within the test, the question to question, or the response to response, is there a consistency, or are they jumping significantly, bearing no correlation or no consistency between the question and question, right? You have 8 questions, and the 8 questions must be in correspondence with each other. Are they reflecting a correspondence? Are they reflecting a consistency? If yes, then yes, your test is reliable. Inter-rater reliability. You put a panel of experts to assess, to evaluate the test, and are they convinced, Are they in correspondence with each other? Are they um, uh, um, are they convinced that the test uh, is reliable, which means the test is reliable, right? So that was criterion one. And what is the second criterion that we had thought, that we had discussed about? Validity. What is validity? Validity is about the content of the question paper, whether the assessment, the test, whether the content that you have put in. So it's about two again. Validity can be seen through these two dimensions. One, content related, and the other, the criteria. What are the criteria that you are looking for to qualify the candidates? Are you looking for their verbal skills? Are you looking for the numerical ability? Are you looking for their memory skill, or are you looking for their for their analytical ability, or are you looking for their reasoning ability? What are the criteria that you have on your mind while designing the test? Likewise, content related. So content related, there are these two components of that evaluate the validity of the test. Face validity. Does the test appear to test what it aims to test? Firstly, I'm giving you the question paper on psychology, and it asks you more about the brain, the brain's components, the disorders, okay, it might be related, but then are you supposed to know so much of the medical sciences about the brain? No, it has to more to do with the functionality of the brain, and then it should bring in more diverse aspects of psychology. I cannot dig deeper into certain aspect and expect you to know more of that, right? Face validity. On the face of it, does the test appear to be capturing the content that addresses the topic of the test or not? Face validity. Does it appear like it is designed to test what it is intended to test, right? Likewise, construct validity. What are the various constructs that you have you identified the constructs? What are the constructs? Construct, as I said, it should be, what are the constructs that it intends, that it plans to assess? Is it planning to assess the construct of intelligence or reasoning? These are the various constructs of the capability of the candidates, or the memory, or the reasoning, or analysis, or is it to describe, elaborate? What is the capability construct that you have, that the test promises to evaluate, and is it evaluating that or not? And if it is, then it makes it a valid test. Likewise, criterion related, there are two aspects, two components to criterion related validity. Concurrent validity, what does it mean? Does the test relate to existing similar measure or not? As we were discussing earlier, concurrent validity, is it, if I want to assess your memory about the chapters that we have discussed in the previous lecture sessions. So what is the validity of how do I measure the concurrent validity? Is this assessment in coherence with the other assessments that are being conducted along with this one? Concurrent, is it corresponding with the other assessments or not? Is it in coherence with the other assessments or not? Or is my test standing in isolation? Is my test standing out as an exception, which disturbs the validity of the test? It does not fall in line with the other tests, other similar tests which intend to measure the same criterion, right? So it has to fall in line. This test has to fall in line, fall in correspondence with the other tests which intend to measure similar criterion. Likewise, predictive validity. Does the test predict later performance on a related criterion? What does that mean? So for instance, if you take the test of English language, you have popular tests exclusively designed for English language, like English language test, international English language test, which means it's a language of English which is put to the candidates to ensure that when this candidate migrates to an English speaking country, the candidate should be comfortable in leading a life there, right? So, are you designing the test in such a way that on qualifying such a test, the candidate should really be able to migrate to the new country and actually lead a comfortable life while speaking in English with the candidates? Is the purpose of this of the test actually serving in reality, in practicality, predictive validity? How far is your test effective in predicting the reality of the subsequent behaviors of the candidate? So that's reliability, that's validity, and those are the two criteria which are absolute essentials for any assessment to be qualified as a test, right? Okay, so that takes us to the various theories of intelligence. So far we have understood what intelligence is, what intelligence test is, and what are the criteria for an intelligence assessment to be officially declared as a test. And now we take a deeper dive into various theories which are propounded, which are theorized by, which are offered, contributed by various eminent thinkers from across the fields, and the very first attempt of such a kind to understand intelligence and to offer some input, some insights into understanding the nature of intelligence was done by Francis Galton. Uh, Francis Galton has, though the theory did not receive a wide applause from across the circles, but then we should be thankful for his maiden attempt to offer some understanding, some insights to dwell deeper into this concept of intelligence. So Francis Galton was heavily influenced by the theory of evolution, the observations of theory of evolution by Darwin, Charles Darwin, as he also happens to be the nephew of Charles Darwin, and hence he drew a conclusion that intelligence is a subject of inheritance. Intelligence is completely a subject of inheritance. That is, you are only as much intelligent as much you are genetically, you have inherited it from your parents or the lineage of your family, right? And hence he was known for very primitive, very early, and not so very scientific approaches to measure intelligence. He was of the view that intelligence had more to do with the physiology, the physicality of an individual. That is, intelligence has a strong correlation with the eyesight, the visual acuity, the auditory acuity, the grip strength, and these were considered as the indicators of intelligence. Higher the visual acuity, higher the auditory acuity, that is the eyesight and hearing, stronger the grip of the individual, the more intelligent was a person considered by Francis Galton. The size of the head, likewise, the physiological parameters were given higher priority rather than the mental faculty or the cognitive capacities or cognitive abilities of the individual. And hence, though it was seen as an initiative by Francis Galton to bring some insights, bring some necessity to deliberate, discuss, argue about intelligence, but the theory could not stand the ground for too long, and it paved the way for subsequent theories around intelligence. Okay, that's an assessment you need to finish before you move on. Okay, so the next groundbreaking work was done by Alfred Binet. So this was the times during in the late 19th century when the French government had declared that the education must be made compulsory for all the children. So there was a revolutionizing attempt by the French government to bring all the kids to the school, and hence there was a necessity to put the students of various age groups into various classes. But how would you put that? There was no instrument as yet then to assess the student and decide as to which kid goes to standard 5, which kid goes to standard 7, which kid goes to standard 10. So this was a job that was entrusted by the French government to Alfred Binet to devise an instrument, to design an instrument and deploy the instrument which could assess the students, the kids, and which could determine as to which student, which kid goes to which standard of the school, right? So and that's how the first ever instrument to assess intelligence on paper was devised by Alfred Binet in association with, of course, the government of France. And this instrument became so very popular that it was in due course, it was inherited, it was inducted into the globally famous Stanford University. So a couple of observations about Alfred Binet's test. Intellectual development progressed at variable rates. So you cannot treat all the age groups of students of similar, all the students of similar age group to go to the same standard. That doesn't happen, right? There could be slow learners, there could be accelerated learners, there could be on an average learners. There are learners of all kinds in the same age group, and hence you need to have an instrument, a structured instrument to conduct the assessment. And Alfred Binet also suggests that it could be influenced by the environment. What do we mean by environment? The contexts, the context in which the environment, the ecosystem in which the child gets to grow up, the neighborhood, the parenting, friends, etc. All these mean a lot. Intelligence was not based solely on genetics. So this is a striking disapproval of Galton's proposition that intelligence was an exclusive subject of inheritance, which was discarded by Alfred Binet, and he went on to design this assessment instrument called Alfred Binet's intelligence scale, which in due course, as I suggested, it was inducted by the Stanford University with the help of this professor from Stanford called Louis Terman. So the first edition of the revised scale of intelligence by Alfred Binet was published in Stanford version in 1916, and Louis Terman had promoted this test as Stanford Binet test. Stanford, of course, because the university inducted it, and Binet because he was the man behind the instrument. And that's when, for the first time, a mathematical interpretation of intelligence had emerged. What is that? It's called IQ, intelligence quotient. So whatever numbers that you saw in the first slide, against all the names that were names and the images that you saw, you recall Albert Einstein, Sharon Stone, or Gary Kasparov, Paul Allen, all those people had that number, and that 3-digit number is what you see now here, the formulated version, the mathematically formulated version of intelligence called IQ, intelligence quotient, which now has a mathematical formula. What is that? Mental age, by chronological age into 100. If my mental age is uh, say 50 and my chronological age is 45, so what would be my IQ? So it will be uh, somewhere around 100 and 120 or so, between 110 and 120. So that's so any score of IQ, if um, your mental age, your chronological age is 20, and your mental age is 25, and what is the what is the IQ that you have? 125. Yes. So that's the IQ. Any IQ that is higher than 100 is considered on the higher side of um, of of the normal IQ, and that's how you calculate the intelligence quotient, which came during the induction of this scale of intelligence. The first mass administration of IQ was administered in the World War One, when they had to recruit people in heavy numbers, in thousands, and you had to determine as to which candidate goes and is posted as an officer, which candidate can be considered for officer at a later years, and which candidate can never become an officer, can will just have to be posted as a soldier and will remain soldier forever, right? With 1.7 million soldiers during World War One, this was administered across, and and looking at the capability levels of the individuals, the the scale of intelligence was split into two types: Army Alpha and Army Beta. What is that? Army Alpha was for those who could read, who could write, who could comprehend, who could interpret, who could analyze, etc. Army Beta was for those who could not read and write, who could just draw interpretations from images, from pictures, right? So that's how another version of assessment of intelligence was devised and was administered in World War One. And some of the interesting conclusions from these two tests, as you can see, 25% of these candidates who were administered with this test could not complete the alpha test, which means all those go into beta, right? They could not comprehend, they could not interpret, they could not uh, analyze, or they could not understand what was captured in the test. And the scores of this test ranged from A through E. A scorers would be trained as officers, D and D would never become officers, and the grades between, that is B and C, they can be considered at a later year, not immediately like A, but they can be definitely considered. So these were some of the very crucial conclusions that happened to be drawn from the assessment, and that established the importance of IQ, and further the importance of something like an intelligence assessment test or a scale, which could derive such very very crucial conclusions. Okay, so that's, if you're interested, you can take that Stanford Binet test. That link will take you to Stanford Binet test, which is as popular even today as it was earlier. Okay, so there were still some elements of dissatisfaction in Stanford Binet's test, as David Wexler thought that it was for young ones only. What about the adults? What about the kids? And hence he thought it cannot be one test. One test cannot be an assessment instrument for people of all age groups. So he realized the necessity of various tests for various age groups, and he went on to devise um, two more instruments, namely Wechsler's Adult Intelligence Scale and Wechsler's Intelligence Scale for children. So, and the criteria that he had emphasized on to design this test included verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed, how quick you are in thinking. So that was about David Wechsler and his scales. That takes us to the okay, right. So that takes us to the next theory of intelligence by Charles Spearman. I'm sure you must have come across something called Spearman's quotient in statistics. He was fundamentally a statistician, and hence he devised something called a factor analysis. So basically, he looked at intelligence as a function of several factors, and he believed. Why would he call those factors? Because there was an interrelatability among these factors. As he saw, if one factor if one factor is assessed, that stands as an indication of the other factors performance as well, right? So he used factor analysis as the basis for explaining his theory of intelligence, and he believed that factor analysis used number of different test items to measure common abilities. So he would believe in something, a common tendency or a common behavioral indicator or common indicator for their intelligence, which he referred to as the G factor, the general or G factor, which was responsible for overall performance on mental ability tests. Which would mean, as you see the image below, he would call the general intelligence of an individual as a factor of these four components, say verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, abstract visual reasoning, and short-term memory. So according to Spearman's theory of intelligence, he would believe that if I get a score on my verbal reasoning, that should be an indicative score for my quantitative reasoning too. See, if I get a score of 7 on 10 on verbal reasoning, predictably my score on quantitative reasoning should also be somewhere around 7. It cannot be a 2 or it cannot be a 10. So that's what, as you see, people who did well in one area tended also to do well in other areas. This statement, though it was not taken very well by the subsequent theorists, because they believed that intelligence is not all about learning language and crunching numbers. There is more to intelligence, and those avenues of intelligence need not be dependent on each other. Which are those theories we will look into a little while later, but as of now, Charles Spearman believed that there is a general factor, which is a factor of several dependent or interrelated components, like you see in the image down there. And so further, it suggests that high scores in vocabulary suggested high performance on reading comprehension too. The theory of general intelligence, also known as two-factor theory, that is general intelligence, which is a combined indicator of various abilities that you see down there, each of which is referred to as a specific ability. Verbal reasoning is a specific ability, quantitative reasoning is a specific ability, abstract visual reasoning is a specific ability, and short-term memory is a specific ability. Bundled together, these are also correlated that the individual score of these is an indicative of a general intelligence. So considering these two factors, specific and general, this is also referred to as two-factor theory of intelligence by Charles Spearman. Okay, and then we have the theory by Louis Thurston. So who was more like he did not disagree with Spearman's theory. It's just that he made it a little more elaborate. He called the G factor as primary mental abilities, and he made the list of specific abilities more clear, more specific, much clearer than Spearman's. As you can see, primary mental abilities as identified by Louis Thurston included numerical ability, that is your ability to deal with numbers, the various operations of mathematics, verbal ability, spatial ability. How good are you in understanding the directions, the dimensions, the length, the velocity, the edges, the corners, the geometric abilities of an individual. Memory, of course, memory. How good is your encoding, storing, and retrieval. Verbal fluency, how good you are at language, understanding language, your vocabulary, usage of language, appropriateness of the vocabulary usage. Inductive reasoning, how good you are in building your explanations, building your reasons, building logics, and deriving meaningful conclusions from the logics is about inductive reasoning. And how quick, how efficient is your perceptual speed? How fast do you perceive things? And how close is your perception to its reality? So those are the seven mental abilities that are considered by Louis Thurston as primary mental abilities. So both the theories of Thurston as well as Spearman are of the belief that these specific abilities are together an indicator of the general ability of the individual. Okay, you need to finish the question, answering the question before you move on to the next portion of the video. Now, this is the man who had a striking disapproval to Spearman's and Thurston's theory of intelligence. He says intelligence is absolutely fluidic and the factors of intelligence could be totally independent. Now, he could demonstrate this by bringing more factors, by adding more novel factors, new factors, which were not even thought of in any of the previous theories of intelligence. Like, for example, if you see music is a capacity. Music, if someone is excelling in music, you cannot expect him or her to be good at verbal skills. Or naturalist who has a flair towards nature, environment, ecosystem, you cannot expect that individual to be good at spatial understanding, spatial dynamics, right? So Howard Gardner was of the view that intelligence could be a factor. Factor analysis is still holding good, but what he does not agree with is the interrelatability, comparability, or the interconnectedness of the dimensions of intelligence, factors of intelligence, to determine the intelligence of an individual. He held the view that these all could be the various factors to determine the intelligence, and these are absolutely independent of each other. Interpersonal skills, someone who's interpersonally very effective, communicating with people, reaching out to people, striking a conversation, building the viewpoints, these are certain ability. And spatial ability or naturalist or logical reasoning, they are absolutely independent from each other. Spatial, so likewise you have various factors, as you see on the screen: logical reasoning, interpersonal, bodily kinesthetics, how swift, how agile one is, which you would find in the athletics or sports personnel. They could be, and there is an immense element of intelligence they demonstrate in striking a golf ball, or hitting a stroke in cricket, or pushing the ball into the goal in football. All these are the aspects of intelligence, an assessment of distance, velocity, the air resistance, or the various aspects that do demand your thinking and hence executing. So that was Gardner's theory of intelligence. And okay, and that takes us to the final theory on intelligence, Robert Sternberg, who also agrees to Gardner's theory of intelligence, calling it an independent factor based subject. However, he gives a broad classification of the various criteria that make it a theory. He looks at the three criteria that contribute to intelligence as componential theory, subtheory, experiential, and contextual. In other words, he thinks that the intelligence of an individual could be demonstrated on these three primary criteria. Componentially, what are the componential? What are the components of componential theory? You have meta components. Meta components, the core basic components where the person demonstrates the ability to plan, control, monitor, and evaluate the various aspects in his or her space, right? Likewise, performance components, the problem solving abilities, the creative abilities of the individual. Likewise, knowledge acquisition, how effective you encode, combine, compare information, analyze, elaborate, compare, or critical evaluation, right, of the information. So these are certain aspects that explain the componential theory. Likewise, experiential, there's a lot learned through experience, personal experience, where you are put to a situation practically where you are dealing with a problem, you are trying to shoot the problem, and in the process of shooting the problem, you are devising the ways, means, techniques that promise to solve the problem, right? And in the process, novel thoughts, insights might occur that result in the creative problem solving, ideation, new thinking, insightful thinking. So that's one way of demonstrating intelligence. Context, the context in which the person dwells, the context, environment, ecosystem that one belongs to, brought up, one is brought up, one attends to school, or one goes to work, the office, the boss, the nature of the team, the colleagues, the client, the nature of project, the kind of ecosystem, how conducive is the ecosystem for you to demonstrate your intelligence? Is it conducive to demonstrate innovation, creative thinking? Do you get enough freedom? How can you explain, describe the context is another, the third component of Sternberg's theory of intelligence: componential theory comprising three subcomponents, experiential theory, and contextual theory. So that's about intelligence theory by Robert Sternberg, and that's